Now, the final product spotlight by Nigel Theo, founder of GoodHood.SG. Nigel is a seasoned tech entrepreneur and investor who's passionate about using tech for good. He started his career as a government scholar, but gave that up for a road less traveled. After a successful run in the investment space, he decided to live a life that is purpose driven, plunging into the world of entrepreneurship. Nigel will shed light on unlocking the value of neighborhoods in a digital world. Nigel, please.
Hi, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nigel here. Super excited to be able to share and super honored to be able to share with you guys about GoodHood.SG. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so what's GoodHood.SG? GoodHood.SG is actually a hyperlocal social network. And how it all started was around the end of last year. I was chatting with the head of product design at Carousel, and we're just saying we miss the good old days when we were younger, and everybody just hung out with each other, played with each other, fought with each other. But there was a lot more, neighborliness and connectedness, right? And there was also a lot of social capital. When people needed help, we helped each other, right? So that started out as a passion project around the late part of last year. We just did a bit of, as a hobby project, we did a bit of market research, talked to some people who tried it before. One of them actually spent $2 million and told me that, hey, you're wasting your time. Don't do it, right? But we still, being a bit headstrong, went ahead and did it because we felt that there was a lot of value to be made and to be unlocked for society, right? So a little bit more about myself. I like many of you here, I spent some time abroad. I did my undergrad in Cornell, and then I went to Stanford, and it was Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech, and he said, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. And that kind of has guided my life up till now. So after graduation, I came back to Singapore because I really, really wanted to serve my bond, right? And after serving my bond, then I thought, hey, let's try the investment space, because I like playing computer games, and for me, the investment space was a bit like a computer game. And after that, I realized, hey, the money is good and everything, but there's something missing, right? So then I started being a lot more active in community building and helping those around me, right? So I stepped up, and I'm serving as the co-president of the Cornell Alumni Club in Singapore, and then also started going into the startup space in the areas of connecting people, right? I did an earlier startup around connecting investors, and now I'm doing GoodHood. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? So what's 2%? 2% is the number of people the number of friends people have on Facebook who are their neighbors, right? So if you go through your Facebook feed and list and see how many friends are there on your Facebook friends list who are neighbors, 2% is the rough number, right? And then don't talk about the content-wise, the content that Facebook feeds you. But why is this important? And why is this important enough for the Singapore government to actually be giving People's Association $800 million a year to do community building? Can we have the next slide, please? So actually, if you look at it, in the year 2000, Robert Putnam from a Harvard professor wrote Bowling Alone, and he said one of the big challenges of community is actually the individualization of leisure. And that was when there was more around TV and a little bit starting bits of the internet. But nowadays we have TikTok, right? That's totally taking away people's in-between time and taking time that you can just go into your phone and spend time, right? And then one of the challenges of Facebook is that it tends to be a bit of an echo chamber. And then Instagram supports a bit of comparison culture, and something unique in Singapore is that we have smaller families and we have an aging population. So it's actually going to be very, very challenging because we have less support from our families, and with an aging population, we need it even more when we grow old. So some of the outcomes of this, the dangerous outcomes of all these melting pot inputs, is that people generally become more selfish because they're more self-sufficient. And then there's increased polarization. We see in the recent US elections, right? with Trump and Biden. Very interesting times, and also increased stress, right? Because you now have less social support from your friends, and we know that community is very, very important for social health. So weaker health also, we spend less time going out and increased loneliness. So these are some of the challenges and the consequences of a more insular society that we face today. Can we have the next slide, please? So yeah, so what's GoodHood? So for GoodHood, we are hyper-local. We are customized from ground up, where we want to build a very, very high trust environment. We have audit trail, and we actually, because of high trust, we can actually allow anonymity, which I'll touch on a bit later. The next point is we actually have real identities. So just last week, Forrest Lee added me on Facebook, right? And I'm like, wow, okay. I mean, his wife and I used to attended Cornell at the same time. But out of the blue, why is Forrest Lee adding me on Facebook? So I went to check, and the profile actually is / Nick Nash, one of the investors from General Analytic, right? So I did my part. I reported that it was a fake identity. So that's also one of the differentiators that we have very, very high fidelity in terms of who we let onto our community and our platform. And the third key differentiator is that we are very, very anchored around kindness, which is a very interesting dynamic, because a lot of other companies are actually heavily focused around what can make us money, right? So up till now, we haven't done any revenue yet. We haven't, and right now we're actually really designing from ground up and thinking hard around what is important, helpful, and useful for society, for community building, right? A lot of features we do actually cannot generate any revenue and profits, but we do them because we actually help lives and help people, right? And the other thing about GoodHood is that we want to encourage offline to online to offline interactions and re-interactions. So comparing with a lot of digital communities and platforms, they actually just want to keep you on the platform. But for us, we actually want to encourage people to go offline to build those relationships. If you want to start your own WhatsApp group, that's fine with it. So, but what we do is we help to organize and help discovery in terms of neighborhood information and content. All right, can we have the next slide? Okay, so I think the next slide covers how do we then provide that context, right? So one of the big challenges in neighborhoods now in Singapore is that many people are friendly. Many people are private. A lot of people are private. Many people are friendly. But even the friendliness, very often it doesn't go beyond the highs in the lifts and in the lobbies and in the common areas, right? Because in the Asian context, we are paise. We are not sure. Will people look at us and think, what's wrong with you? I value my privacy. Don't get into my space. And another reason for that is because we live in very closed and tightly packed communities. So even more, and the stresses of life, even more people value their private spaces. But how we do it differently is when you enter GoodHood, we encourage everyone to actually write a self-introduction. And these are just some of the self-introductions that people write and have. So straight up, people have an understanding of what's the context of their neighbors, right? And you can see from just a few of these introductions, people can be quite diverse. People talk about working out at the gym. Another one is more interested in volunteering. Please let me know if you need help. And another is talking a little bit about religion, right? So community is actually, and when we have people so close together, sometimes some of these provides a bit of friction if we don't understand each other a little bit more. We don't see the common points a little bit more. So at GoodHood, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to enable and allow neighbors to see their points of commonality, and then to encourage interaction, because interaction builds trust, right? And then whether the interaction is online, offline, we don't care, right? So one of the features that we rolled out recently was around events, and we want to allow and encourage people to straight away see what events are happening in their neighborhoods, rather than a whole list of universal events around whole of Singapore, which what Facebook has, right? So one of the big challenges is diversity, and we are using technology and a bit of the process and design to encourage neighbors to discover more things about each other, right? Okay, can we have the next slide? So some of the interesting use cases we've seen is, I mean, there's very standard lost pets. People lost their birds, people lost their dogs. I'm not too sure how people can lose dogs in Singapore, but we have seen that come up, right? And there are people giving away free stuff, like free hospital beds was one of the more interesting things that we've seen. Yeah. So and then your secret lab chairs and stuff like that, right? So and then we also have a feature for requesting help and offering help. And because of a high trust baseline, we can actually allow people to request for help anonymously. I don't think any platform actually currently allows that. Sure, some people might use Telegram and chatbots and stuff like that. But I recently learned that there are some programs out there that you can create fake Telegram accounts very easily. So even then, we don't really know who's asking for help. So at GoodHood, one of the things we do is we require mobile verification, and therefore a Singapore mobile verification. So you need to have a Singapore mobile number, and for that to happen, you need to have a Singapore passport, right, or some kind of identification. So we use that as a proxy. We are also looking to implement SingPass verification at some point in time, but we're also mindful that too much friction might also prevent people from connecting initially. So offering help, we see all sorts of people, finance professionals. This particular example was a finance professional who went out to meet a need, and then after meeting the need, the guy who just asked for 3 or 4 items from the supermarket. That was just right smack when circuit breaker, the lockdown hit in Singapore, and there was total chaos. People were there was a lot of displaced people, and the traditional help channels were all choked up. So people who needed help really just turn to all sorts of places that they can to get help. And then what we also saw was that there are a lot of people who actually want to offer help, right? And then because they feel that it's a time for them to give back to society, especially if they're in a better position. So crisis actually brings people together. So and interestingly, there was a post that happened recently. This O-level student was sharing that, hey, um, I really wanted to share about GoodHood. She wrote about GoodHood in her O-levels paper about the incentive of GoodHood and what we stand for. The goodness of community, bringing people together, right? Okay, can we have the next slide? Okay, yeah. So one of our key, I'll touch a bit on the tech here, and our key principles is we want to move fast. We launched the MVP in 1 month. We acquired 6,000 users in the first month on zero marketing. And I mean, in part, that was due to a lot of the work and the traction that we were getting and the help that we were providing for the families. So we got a lot of press coverage, all inbound. And also in terms of the last thing that we're also thinking of is how do we balance trust building versus privacy, right? And that's where we design GoodHood very interestingly and really from the ground up. We show people the distance, but if you are less than 200 meters, we just show you less than 200 meters. Beyond, if you're more than 200 meters, we show you the distance in multiples of 10 meters. So this kind of ground up design, really very attention to detailed design is you probably won't see in any other platforms, right? So in terms of the tech stack, we use DigitalOcean, Firebase, Hasura, and React Native, and that's a lot of cloud-based stuff. So that actually helped us to launch very quickly. Yeah. Okay. Can we have the next slide? Okay. So another example of moving fast. When we launched, so in the last few months, we also saw Singapore elections, and one of the things that we thought would be helpful for Singapore, because elections is a very divisive time, right? A lot of people were complaining about the other party and then rooting for their own parties. So what we wanted to do is create a safe space where there were verified users to be able to share and share each other's points of view. Because on Facebook, you really don't know who's paying for what propaganda and which users are fake, which users are real in terms of commenting. But what we realized is, so we launched this product, the elections product, in a week. But we learned that, hey, actually, people were still afraid people kind of wanted to hide behind a bit of anonymity, most people, and therefore still kind of reverted to the Facebook for the more vocal people. Okay, But what's interesting is actually some MPs actually asked us to white label GoodHood before the elections. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of interest in community building, but it's a very, very challenging task. Yeah. Yeah. Can we have the next slide? Okay. So looking ahead, what are some plans? We definitely want to continue integrating into local community groups. So one of the pilot communities we're starting off is one of the largest GRCs in Singapore, Tampines, right? So we're working at the GRC level with someone from People's Association, with the head of People's Association there to push things forward. And we're also looking at integrating with local interest groups, and also to deploy. Now we're starting to think of how do we deploy modules to generate revenue, but at the same time, it should not be revenue for revenue's sake, right? So some of the things that we're looking at is group buy, which we see a lot of interest in, but we also see a lot of abuse and a lot of pain points by group buy leads and also group buyers. How do we allow people to discover stuff that is more relevant for them rather than always being pushed stuff, right? Yeah. So I'm coming to my last slide now. Yeah. So I think all in all, community building is a very, very challenging task, right? We are fighting against the big boys who have lots of money, who are vying for your attention. And how then do we really revive the kampong spirit? How do we bring neighbors back closer together? How do we enable them to discover things about each other that makes them want to interact with each other more, work together with each other more, and then eventually do great things together, right? Let's say, I mean, some of the potential use cases could be people who want to, like my wife is saying, hey, it'd be nice if we can have a nicer pub in Bishan, right? So yeah, people can do things together. So I think the last call to action is if you'd like to contribute in any way, we're looking for these few profiles: mobile developer, product designer, marketer, and community builders. And here's how you can reach me. Thank you, everyone.
Nigel, many thanks indeed. There can surely be no better time in global history than an initiative to try and bring people in their neighborhoods together and solidify their interactions in an authentic way, as you were saying. Many thanks for that presentation. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this series of short presentations